Oh man. Oh well. So here we have La M, and all they can say is he's Joto. For having all that astral projection power, having all that magical ability to be present somewhere and be actually recognized or realized for being there, and yet again, you still bring nothing to the table. You know? Kind of sucks for y'all, you know? I was kind of looking forward to being astral projection, but since that's his job and all it consists of, fuck that. You know? So apparently, for those that don't know it, you know, we've transcended, crossing boundaries that apparently brought us into relation with metaphysical, and that led to not so physical, which is why we're here, putting on a constant show, you know, because observation is power, you know, and there's entities that were haunting us that realized this, and by hiding it from us and keeping it from us, they were utilizing the observation power, you know, causing people to perform in their lives rather than actually being present and alive. So essentially what I would be doing right here right now is, you know, as we usually do, is looking and processing what the body is feeling, you know, looking at alignment, looking and seeking any tension that might be present on our body, you know. So I had this video I was gonna make. It was regarding how people live supposedly to live, but the purpose of life is to lead to an ending and letting go and learning how to live letting go. That's why a day, let's just say, in our perception, is presented in a way where it doesn't necessarily seem to be addressed by our wording it in such a way as something that would carry over. Though essentially that's how it is. It's just through and through, you know. So, learning that I've learned also how to capture, you know, entities. I'll relate them as being astral projections, which is basically a ball of impulse light that floats around, you know, and is able to then somehow access your body, enter, you know, the aspect of what's called your nervous system and its responses. So this astral projection's job is initially to activate your body and to get you to begin to question or ask questions in your mind that thus then is hijacked by another entity that directs that thought process to being something that is rather more conducive for the cycle that they're attempting to develop, because that's what it's all about. So I'm here, I'm watching my impulses, you know, like I'll pick up my chest, I'll hold it, I'll notice that I can breathe easily, and then I'll let go of that tension, that posture, that, you know, basically like state of existence, and then I'll just see what presents itself. Because tension usually shows up, if not on the shoulders, on the back. If not on the back, then it's like the stomach, you know, from the root chakra all the way up to the crown chakra is essentially the highway that these entities drive, you know, and all of it is kind of like, it's like having to live a whole year with your body doing extra stuff, and the whole world being able to not only see that extra stuff but call it whatever names they can find that'll trigger you, you know? Whether they say, "Oh, look at that clown ass," or "Look at that monkey," or "Look at that," well, you know, the names just go on and on, you know? So, but essentially, it's you finding yourself disliking some aspect of the workings and mechanics of your body's function, you know. And essentially it isn't even you, it's like a perception then that has hijacked you and your perception, so as thus it's like building your point of view for you. Think about it. If my words can lead me to things, then if my words have ever been deviated or in any manner disrupting in what their intent is to actually do. And in those notions, is it due to a construct that I'm looking over, or is it just random, sporadic thought patterns or standout or magnified perspectives on this point of view that you might be addressing or viewing? And it's called basically the same mastery that you already had. Basically, what it actually requires you to do is to filter out all your problematic thinking, because there's no such thing as a problem whatsoever. Problems are delusions or illusions. People living by them are willingly choosing to live in a lie or some form of self deception for lack of wanting to put out the effort necessary to not only mentally arrive at something, but emotionally cope with whatever it may bring you, and even bring that to find coherence in itself to provide for you to yourself. Another way that the mind seems to be disturbed is, think about like a sound entering your ear, and then think about another sound simultaneously entering your ear. Now you have two different, let's just say they're two different words, and those two different sounds delivering two different messages. Now, the brain can manage and basically process all that data without conscience. But when you start to invite your conscience to do that kind of work for you, your conscience then is replaced with another conscience, and you never really realize it. So essentially, you go from a person that is present to living a conscious life that is not your desire, not your intention, not where you want to be, or the point where you're asked to begin from or start something, or aim to achieve something. But apparently rhythm seems to be very important, you know so you got to think of rhythm like war. When you go to war, there's drums. Think about like a rock star being in a fight, in a battle with the entire stadium of audience, and the whole audience is held at bay because the rock star does his job. If the rock star sucked, well, you can imagine that the crowd would probably make a point to make that known. So essentially, this is an aspect of yourself that you have to learn to navigate. It's the intensity of you. The sides of yourself that maybe are underdeveloped or haven't began to develop, or maybe you just haven't even realized that they're there. You know? So so internally right now, I'm just measuring my internal equilibrium and how it seems to be moving around. I find it odd, but understanding this astral projection and that's been its highway impulses, I must assume that it's astral projection doing again its thing. Maybe it was just disturbances attempting to create this atmosphere or environment or perception, or simply cue somebody in this direction, Because there has been this masculine energy that has hijacked a narrative, and the narrative has already been squashed and is dead, but this masculine energy, for some reason, is insistent upon trying to bring back to life a dead narrative. You know? It's almost like saying, we're here obsessing over La M, or we're here obsessing over, the government, or we're here obsessing over, countries, or, however it is that you guys might perceive yourselves, viewing whatever in life might be, related in this sense, whether it's gang related, business related, or whether it's corporation related. However it is that you find yourself understanding these concepts that you shouldn't fear, because it's what runs obviously a system of control. So you got to look at these parts of whatever control is displayed in these aspects and examine them very thoroughly, because it's basically you yourself that are looking at you yourself. You know? So whatever intelligence, whatever benefits, whatever profits they're experiencing through those, experiences, you yourself are also able and entitled to be able to learn from that and grow from that. You know, and that's what big business is essentially. Now, you see how calmness and tranquility is here. Now, the versions of ourselves that we've established and stabilized from this into whatever it is we can come up with, because that's the whole you know aspect of venturing to the edge of places and things and ideas that other people might shy away from, or not feel themselves prepared enough, or concentrated, determined enough, or even focused enough, or maybe even more willing to simply explore whatever state of presentation might bring itself forth. Right now, I'm still feeling these tensions in my body going and coming and going and coming. You know? It's like, the way I want to look at it is like if I activate one of my centers, and when my center gets activated, something shows up to attack it. And then, it basically causes like attention to deviate from that center. And so all of a sudden, somebody else sees an advantage in that, and so they start questioning you, getting you to, or asking you questions, so you will find yourself in your mind inquiring into this matter. you know Seems like the mind's like a quantum processor when it's structured and constructed, as some would see, in the manner that then would provide outcomes and results. Well, right now I've fought this delusional reality that intended to try to hide from me the truth, and the truth being that technology has advanced so far in its processes and execution of those processes, that essentially, like, I can sit here and literally see what AI sees. I mean, I could picture whatever it is that I want to picture in my own life. I could visualize, watch movies, replay any light that I have seen through my eyes in my mind. This is a machine that I have, without the delusional aspects of memory, thinking, this or that, which are just essentially words trying to contain something that is, you know, essentially like unwordable to some extent. Yet we attempted to provide words so that we can try to grasp this reality that we exist in. So with the perfection of machine, knowing that a machine can see my life and plan it for me perfectly from life till death, you know, then I understand that there is no such thing as failure. Failure has died. It is a thing of a past, Now there is only success, and in every and any way that you can fathom or even think to imagine. So, I mean, I'm not here fighting any disbelief or any idea any longer in my mind about failing or not doing this or not doing that. It's already been a process of thought in my experiences that I've managed through other circumstances that presented the capacity for that to be managed. So it's like basically school all over again. Except this time I get to go into school knowing that I'm both the teacher and the student. You know? Or having been forced to explain my whole reality, or my whole internal reality, to my external reality, or whatever observing processes, or whatever you guys want to use to try to put it in a box, like all those aspects that have basically studied me, studying myself, to learn what it is that I found out or learned about myself, essentially discovering that I'm a machine that operates lights, or light, and essentially these lights are absorbed into my being, are processed through a state of presence, existence, and through conscience was supposed to have been the way to arrive at this life being something much more able to be presented, with certainty and the aspects that we want to magnify. But essentially, with whatever it is that we created in life to be seen as problem, well, that right there, I mean, has people chasing an illusion, a delusion, something that's not even a thing, you know? And with people who have, attached themselves in whatever astral form or whatever aspect it is that you guys want to use to describe that, like all these things that are here attempting to distort the coherence and just not only thought but also in the heart, how we feel, what we feel, why we feel what we feel, and the process of thought that leads to that. I mean, I lived a life pretending like it was hacked, lying to myself enough so that I believed it and society even supported my belief, all up until I broke both society and myself in that belief, just to make us a lot more better, at least so we thought. Little did we know, we already are at a point in capacity where we already are what we need to be. When you were born and you were young, you were full of life. Right now that you're, grown, now you're full of experiences, and now it's deciding what's the next phase that you want to direct your growth. So here we are, establishing that there's other faculties that I have to be able to account to, my life, my doings, the reasoning, or at least they would like me to believe that, It almost gets tricky in this place of acquiring experiences. It's about the experience. Yet again, the information that you're gathering in those experiences is being treated like somebody else. How do I put this? Well, and then not realized, Well, I would want to know who's the one performing right now for the cameras, because my rhythm to my breath still isn't seeming to be, presently to account for. Instead, I'm consciously aware of not taking breaths right now. So if I'm conscious, then something's already inside of me, because I'm not attempting to be conscious. I'm attempting to be present, and not so much attempting. I'm present. And in this video, I will point out another thing too, is that these entities that are here helping me build these constructs and these structures and these sayings to be able to be absorbed for a person to better be benefited from the experience of interacting with them. Where I was going with this is factoring in that in thought, the mind keeps being driven to think about death. Death being a release of the body. So if I die right now, like you would literally go from seeing me where I'm at to just, let's just say if it was a heart attack, there'd be a process of action, until like finally, and then even still, the only thing that you would factor in is if this person died, then their spirit has left their body. And if their spirit or their energy that was running their body or their heart that was running, circulating, whatever it was that was circulating, maintaining the mind coherence as well. Basically, it's almost like the relationship of the mind and the heart has stopped, and so life has ended. And so For a lot of us, we live this life where we don't realize how our mind and our heart are being separated. And so, thus, we live dead without even realizing that we're living dead. So, now, suppose that we can see, like, or acknowledge that if right now I'm living and I understand that these astral projections are just impulses that are driving my body. So when I die, all that happens is my astral projection body leaves my body so it can no longer cause impulses through my body. So essentially, I've actually been talking with what people would perceive to be dead people when we say we've interacted with some of these beings. Because think about it. If to kill somebody means to stop their heart and their mind from having a relationship, you know? I mean, what has all this been for? What has this been about other than to arrive at some better understanding of the dynamics that lead to not just life, but also a better pursuit of the experience that we will also be asked to take account for, which is our transcendence, as some would put it, our death, our end, our follow through, you know. So with the changes that amount, I mean, it's just essentially exiting one vessel, entering a different container that can still hold the energy from this vessel until, depending on what frame of structure I'm using to guide or be guided, you know. So essentially, and I can still hear this ether noise, I can still relaying some form of communication. Irrelevant, because clearly, I mean, you know, it's funny because I've been those people, I lived their lives. I felt their feelings. I felt their memories. I let them live inside of me and I became those people, you know? So, I mean, why I would be okay with a broken personality or perception of my person, from another personality, like it would be essentially because I'd understand that dynamic, you know? I understand now what it is to have astral projections sharing in my life with me. It means not all my pain was mine, not all my lessons were mine, and not every experience was just for me. And we all know that part's a lot more bigger, And I like it that the cameras, they can read this behavior, They can tell when, when I'm here and I'm like, tense, my shoulders up, maintaining my body posture, strengthening my spirit body so that there's tension throughout my body or that there's blood flowing through my body, So, and the entire time I'm just observing to see what this entity is still up to, Because, like, I already know this much and it's still doing what it's doing. I mean, I can only imagine it's just performing for the cameras. Like, the cameras can read this kind of behavior, body language, So I could be like, people would just get an idea or a belief, some perspective, some perception. It's almost like me forcing your mind to think something about me, just by taking action. And you know what I also like to do? I like to try to levitate just by like pushing up on all my body and realizing that there is no reason for me to feel like I need the safety of down, Since I constantly live day to day with these astral projections, it's kind of like living like this. you try to walk and you almost feel like you're not touching the ground, and you're like, how the heck am I even moving? You know? But this is what the astral projection's job is, just to do this, to raise your body, your spirit energy, your blood circulation, to maneuver your plasma. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but it's all these perspectives of oneself, you know? And it looks like this and it sounds like that, but all it is just astral projection and a ball of impulse electric uh, magnetic influence, you know, essentially applying itself to your body. So it's almost like saying my presence is electromagnetic. So my presence through this electromagnetic field sends impulses to my conscience, thus forming conscience to be in this body, you know? So it starts with this field of electromagnetic, you know, that I have to bridge my presence to a conscience, you know? And how many of you guys, when you do that, you find that you step into a body that has preconceived ideas, preconceived emotions, preconceived like perspectives, even at that, you know? So that's essentially a conscience. A conscience is you possessing yourself through your presence and the electromagnetic field that you generate to produce your astral body. Because think about it, how can astral projections be moving around in the atmosphere unless there is an electromagnetic field also, not just around my being, but also holding this, you know, this world and containing everything in it? Or else these astral projections might just, who knows, you know, float off into nothingness. I mean, I don't know, who would know, you know? But essentially, electromagnetic fields seem to be the ether, we'll just say, you know, that is misperceived or misunderstood. So I still feel this astral projection here subjecting me to observing myself, you know? It's like his job is only to get me to hate myself or to hate through me other people, you know? Hmm. Well, think about it, dude. If 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 this astral projection being is a fat man, let's just think about it like this, right? And this fat man enters your body, and then all of a sudden this fat man starts to do what fat people do, eat, you know? Next thing you know, you go from 150 pounds to 250 pounds. You gain a whole 100 pounds, you know? This astral projection entity, you know, basically transformed you into it. So when you look at yourself, you identify as it rather than recognizing yourself as being what you originally knew yourself in, you know, the process of pretty much circumstances and so on and so forth, you know? So think about it like this. This is what the astral projection is doing right now. You know, it's a fat man and it wants food. So we have to figure out what is its mask of fat. What is fat covering? Because fat is covering something. And then the food, you know? What is he essentially looking to feed to satisfy whatever he's covering for, you know? So if I have a fat man here as an astral projection, and the only way to notice him is to notice that he's going to want to eat, then I'm going to start to pay attention and realize, or maybe not even pay attention, or realize that all of a sudden my impulses have leaned more towards food consumption, you know? And so that's essentially, I mean, how these entities work, you know? You go from starting off a skinny man, they get there, and then they turn you into a fat man. That just means that people will believe more likely the narrative that they present or give or to rise in you in some way more than whatever you yourself might find yourself attempting to fight for the perspective of. You know? So it's like saying, I'm not fat, I'm fluffy. You know? Shout out. So now that we understand the dynamic, and these astral projections are very simple. You know, their mask is an astral projection, and their food are impulses. You know, so if you're a conscious being, right, and you don't have a body, but you want to make things happen like a conscious being, you go and you look for a body that you can imply or apply those um, impulses, pretty much driving whatever it is into a state of outcome or result. You know? So right now, what it's basically attempting to do is trying to fool me, and it's trying to play with me, and it's trying to confuse me, because it knows that I already understand my 5 chakra centers, and it understands that I understand that all it's been doing is simply being overly impulsive in certain chakra centers, we'll just say. Yeah. So it's almost like saying, if they start to get on my shoulder, on my shoulders, and I start to feel my shoulders tensing or posturing or stiffening, because it's showing me that somebody else is present in my body, then when it undergoes that process, these impulses pretty much are how do I put this? Usually overlooked by us. We tend to wave it off as, oh, it's nothing. But what we fail to realize is that there is nothing that is nothing. Everything is something. From the smallest, minuscule, minor thing to the, most macro, humongous, outrageous thing. You know. So like I said, it's just masculine energy that proposed once to fight with feminine energy, which was total BS if you ask me, because ultimately it combined and became divine energy. Think about it right now. When we're in a state of observation, we become angelic. What do the angels do? The angels inside of themselves know that their mind already knows everything possibly that it could know, and that it could probably even feel everything that it could possibly feel. So, me, if I enter my angelic mode, I'd be an observer, watching people's lives like TV has allowed for me and made a way for me to be able to see myself as angelic, because then I have the perception of seeing other people's lives and almost feeling as much as being able to influence that life, simply by guiding or caring for the perception that I take upon that their thing that is observed. So observation is power, and we understand that when we realize that there is another conscience here with us, that's why we're walking in power. That's why people look twice at us, because you know, it's twice as much presence rather than just one presence that is still susceptible to whatever influences, versus this presence that is simply becoming available for whatever it is that seems to be in the interest of its own expansion. Yet it has preconceived notions and ideas that come with the context of it. So that's their favorite place, is talk about what we just discussed: problems being fake, unreal, unrealistic, not true. A delusion with a mind that can solve and a heart that can lead. I mean, there is no such thing as a problem. The only problem that exists is when your mind and your heart aren't coherent. That's when there's problems, left and right. Your heart goes one way and your mind goes another. You know? That's what they call problem, not real, induced, or we'll just say held within potential. So if you guys been observing my tension, like you guys do notice, right, when I'm like holding something like my spine, when I'm holding up my spine or strengthening my center, you know? I mean, it's like it's funny that these things literally are so bold. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for your guys' time, and you guys have a good rest of the night. Ah.